Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Huo.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And Josh, it feels like a long time since I've said that.
I know.
Welcome. Because I was gone for a week, and that felt like a year.
Yes, you were in South Korea.
Yeah.
When you told me you were going, all I could think about was the end of the podcast.
If anything's going to happen. Because I went to the DMZ, and it was incredible and surreal and bizarre and all the things.
Yeah.
But I'm alive, which is great. I was a little on the fence of whether that would happen or not, me being alive. But I'm alive.
It's like, oh, man, I hope she comes back.
Tasha gets shot. It'll be real bad for the podcast.
How am I going to record a new episode and let everyone know? Yeah, you were gone, and it feels like I haven't seen you or talked to you in forever.
It does.
And I didn't like it.
Yeah, me neither.
Threw me in a tailspin.
Without the podcast, we would be lost.
Sure. Totally. That's the other thing is I didn't realize how much of a emotional release this is just to talk about stuff on a weekly basis.
I also look for new content. I'm like, why is there a repeat episode? I want more content.
Hell yeah. But we're back now.
And if you don't know who we are, if you're just joining us for the first time because you saw that we're talking about Tomb Raider, welcome. Oh. We are a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This podcast is just one of the things that we do. We also have a Patreon. We also have a career mentorship for screenwriters. So please remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any of this cool stuff.
Hell yeah.
We'd also appreciate a rating, a comment, and an email to ActTwoWriters@gmail.com or on our Instagram and Twitter at ActTwoWriters to just tell us how you're doing with your writing, send us questions, topic suggestions, all of the things. Okay, go.
I was just so excited because this week Tomb Raider comes out. This is it.
I know.
And you were talking, I just got excited.
Yeah, the nervousness is starting to peel away and give way to excitement.
You should be excited.
Slowly.
At this point, you have no choice. It's coming out.
Yeah. And it is what it is.
The boulder is rolling down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
The mountain is about to become a lot more steep.
Yeah.
So the boulder will just become faster and faster.
Oh, God. Why did my heart just start going faster?
So it's going to be great.
You know what I was told by a Netflix executive? She was like, as soon as it comes out, every room in my house, every room in my parents' house, and all my friends' houses, they're all going to be streaming Tomb Raider on different devices because it matters. Like your computer, your laptop, your phone, your iPad, your TV, like all of the things streaming it matters to the algorithm because Netflix is ruled by algorithms. And apparently the double thumbs up is incredibly important, she said, to the algorithm. So if you're listening to this and you do end up seeing Tomb Raider this week, just consider those factors because that could mean more seasons.
I have a serious question.
Yes.
I've been watching Netflix for quite some time, and I have no idea what a double thumbs up is.
Oh, they changed this, kind of a while ago, Josh. There's like a like button and like a double like button. Like I loved it.
Really?
Yeah.
But I watch things on Apple TV. You're supposed to scroll and say you liked something?
On Apple TV?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's different. I don't know.
No, but like the Netflix app through Apple TV.
Oh. Well, surely the Netflix app also has the double thumbs up.
I'll find out. I'll look. Anyway.
Did you just get a coffee delivery?
Yeah, I just did.
Your wife is the best.
Thank you. Did you see my eyes just jump off the
light
screen?
up?
Coffee? Okay. Well, that's good to know. Netflix, double thumbs up. I would love
really
if
matters.
you get any info on the Netflix algorithm and how it works beyond what people just can generally find out online, you're going to have to let us know.
They are so protective of that stuff. It took the WGA to be like, you have to tell us your numbers to even get a glimpse into viewership stuff. So
Wow.
We'll see.
Okay. It is wild to think that they're looking at where viewing is coming from, which makes sense, you know, whether it be a phone or a laptop or whatever. And it just makes me wonder, like, in the future, or maybe they're already doing this, like tailoring content to that specific device.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I don't mean that's been happening for quite some time.
And also, like, when we're in mixes and stuff, it's like, okay, it's nice to like mix in, you know, theater sound.
Yeah.
But realistically, people are watching this on their TVs with their sound bars or on their iPad like my mom does or on their phones like most kids do. So let's make sure we're also just doing like stereo sound to see what that sounds like.
Oh, man. Can I just say one more thing?
Of course.
This is just
more things.
A slight complaint, unrelated. So my mom uses my Netflix account.
Uh-huh.
And every time I go on to Netflix, it's like I get the suggested things that are like tailored to my mom.
Yeah.
And it annoys me.
Wait, give her her own account, her own like profile.
I said I was going to. No, I think I did, and she still uses mine. And I was like, I'm just going to get your own account, Mom.
Yeah.
And then she was like, no, honey. And so it's been this big fight.
Well, because she's built up this.
Yeah.
This
Now everything is
the
catered to
algorithm's
her.
not for her, so.
And then she said, I was like, oh, man. Then she said to me, honey, it's like one of the things that connects us together.
Oh.
And I was like,
damn, you can't change it now.
Maybe I'll get my own different Netflix account.
Yeah,
anyway,
you change. Don't tell her.
I had some This Weeks in Writing, but I'm bypassing all of them because I think I got really excited, and we had asked for questions to come in for Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
And they were a lot more than I thought.
Amazing. At first we were like, no one cares. No one's emailing us questions.
The truth is, I think we'll get through all of them because there's a little bit of an overlap, but you know, maybe if we don't get to all of them, or if there's something else lingering, hey, maybe we revisit some of the questions in a future episode.
Yeah. I also feel like people will probably have more questions after the show comes out. So
yeah,
we're really encouraging you all who are writers and producers and whatever entertainment industry adjacent. As you watch the show, like, we have this great opportunity to talk about craft or process, all the questions that we all have about how shows get made and what that sausage is like. So please feel free, like, this is the avenue to do that with. So we're kind of just breaking down, how shit gets made in real time.
And I'm just going to reiterate, this is Tomb Raider month. So there's going to be a lot of Tomb Raider stuff. And maybe a Dave Levinson episode for Halloween.
You got it.
That might be the deviation from Tomb Raider month.
It's tradition.
It's tradition. All right, Tasha.
Okay.
Are we doing this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little nervous because I don't know what any of these questions are.
Okay. Well, I had been looking through all of these. And so I'm going to take us on a little journey.
Oh, okay.
Of questions. I'm going to try to create a nice arc with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Oh, you're amazing.
And I'm just going to do my best. So you have mentioned on previous episodes of this very podcast that you have pitched before for Tomb Raider, the film. So just to start, how did you get this job for Tomb Raider that is coming out?
Yeah, I pitched for the movie and I did not get it.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that the reason I didn't get it, they loved my story, but the reason I didn't get it was because they didn't feel like I could handle the big personalities that were involved with the movie, including producers, actors, etc. Because often it's a giant kitchen of people who make movies, right? And I was nervous in the pitch, so they didn't have confidence in my ability to handle that. Cut to months later, I don't remember. It was like kind of close together. I get an email or a phone call from one of the producers on Tomb Raider, the TV show, Legend of Lara Croft. And he's like, I see that you are posting on Facebook these updates that you're playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the most recent video game. Because I was loving it. Like, the world was so beautiful. I was just like taking pictures of my TV and like posting them, which I don't do. It's not like a thing that I do. I just loved it so much and I thought it was so incredible. I was posting them. And so he saw that and he brought me in and he said, it's going to be a while before we get the rights to this, but we're in the works of getting the rights to Tomb Raider to do an animated series. Is that something you would be interested in? And I said, yes. Oh my gosh, absolutely. I was like, there's a spot on my arm where I plan to do a Tomb Raider tattoo. Like, this is a thing that I love. And he said, great, I'll get back to you when we're closer to that possibility.
Wow. Was this on your vision board, by the way?
It's not on my vision board. It's not, I didn't think I'd be running a show. And he was also like, by the way, you don't have any experience running a show, so we're going to pair you with a showrunner. And then it took so long for the rights to close, which is very common, that by then I had been in a TV room, a live action TV room. And so they were like, okay, you understand how a TV room functions and how that all works. So we're not going to pair you with a showrunner. You're just going to do it yourself. Yeah, that's how I got it.
Okay. So then you get it. Now, I'm diving into another question here. How did you manage to select your team? Screenwriters, composers, colorists. Did you already have some names in mind? And how did you bring this team together for the conception of the show? So
Tomb Raider is IATSE. It's the Animation Guild versus the Writers Guild. So there are two guilds. And as a writer, I'm now under both guilds. And some projects are WGA under the Writers Guild. Some are under the Animation Guild. It just kind of depends. And most productions in animation currently are under the Animation Guild, though increasingly writers are demanding that it be covered under WGA. I'm not going to get into like all of the reasons why that's the case, but just to clarify that. So people who are WGA usually get paid way more than people who are in the Animation Guild as writers. So I really wasn't interviewing WGA writers, which is mostly who I know, which is why I'm telling this story. So I wasn't really able to hire someone that I knew, that I was familiar with, because they're like, I don't want to make animation money, Tasha, get the fuck out of here. I can't pay my bills with that. So I started getting a ton of submissions, which is what happens when you're a showrunner and your new show is announced. A ton of submissions come to you from agents. And I will also like email agents myself and say, hey, I'm looking for a writer for this show, and this is the kind of writer I'm looking for, right? Someone who can write action adventure, someone who's a gamer, someone who has ideally played Tomb Raider, because it's such, you have to know the game intimately to write for this, right?
Of course.
And luckily, I got a ton of submissions from people who were big nerds. There's a lot of them in the Animation Guild, and it's awesome. And I ended up hiring Shakira Presley, who is a super awesome writer. She's super experienced in animation, and she had played Tomb Raider. She loved the games, and she's a badass herself. So it was sort of an easy, perfect fit. And then I also hired Troy Dangerfield, who was an assistant, a writer's assistant on the live action Witcher show that I had been on. And I loved him so much. He was so smart and talented and really good in the room. And I thought I can kind of cheat it by hiring him as my assistant because he's also such a great thinker and writer. So I'm basically hiring two writers for the price of one in a way. Originally, actually, they said, you're going to write this whole thing by yourself. And that's how animation is typically done, which is increasingly not true, but has been traditionally true. And I was like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. Part of me was like, yeah, I got this. But then I was like, there's no way I will by myself in a vacuum create the best possible story. I need to talk to someone about this and say, hey, here's my idea. And I need someone to say, no, Tasha, that's a bad idea. How about we actually pivot this way? You know, we talk about that all the time. Like having another partner to talk to about these things can really make the story just so much stronger. So I pushed back and said, I really need someone. They're like, okay, we can afford one person, which is why I cheated and hired two.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the writing process went. And then in terms of Powerhouse, you know, I met with two studios, and Powerhouse, I was just so much true fans of the video game.
Powerhouse being?
Powerhouse Animation Studios, which is the studio that animated the show, and they are in Austin, Texas, and they're fantastic. They've done Castlevania, for example. And yeah, because they were clearly such fans, and the director I was going to hire and the episodic directors I was going to have on the show were all going to be fans of the video game. I was like, well, I mean, duh. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's kind of how that went. I think that answers the question. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, now we're pivoting kind of into some nerd talk here.
Okay. Uh-oh. Josh is allergic to this kind of talk.
I'm kidding.
You're going to start saying words you don't understand, aren't you?
Well, in terms of story and research, how much did you dive into the canon of the Survivor games? I know you have played the games, but have you consulted the comic books as well to avoid some possible reiterations? Did you receive help from Crystal Dynamics? Before you answer that, please explain what the Survivor games are.
Yeah.
And I had to ask you right before this, who's Crystal Dynamics?
Is that a dude?
That's a great name.
So Tomb Raider is a game that's existed since the 90s in many different iterations. Mobile game. You could play it on your computer and on consoles. And then the games kind of stopped. And we were left with like the Angelina Jolie version of Lara Croft, which I think is so iconic I don't even need to explain who that is. Then the Survivor series started in 2013, which was a reboot of the video games that picked up with Lara before she became the Angelina Jolie version of Lara. So in the original video games, you are fully formed Lara Croft. And you have some backstory as you play about like her parents and stuff like that, but you never see her really as a kid unless it's like in minor flashbacks. So now the Survivor series in 2013, with all the new technology that we have in video games and how storytelling had become a huge part of video games at that time, they started with an origin story. So it was college age Lara, or like just shortly after graduation, I forget. And she goes on her first adventure and shit goes terribly wrong. And you see her in that 2013 game kill a person for the very first time, which is a huge deal because if you've played the early games, which you did, Josh, you're just fucking killing fools left and right. Like you don't ask their name first. Like Lara Croft is a serial killer, basically. But in the first game in 2013, she's being attacked and she has no other choice but to kill someone. And it is what it would be for any of us. It is emotional. It is difficult. It is full of guilt and shame and relief. It's all the things. And it was so fun to play that version of a character who had until that point just been a superhero badass, right? So then there are 3 games kind of in that early Lara stage. And so the show takes place after that series and is kind of a bridge now between that early version of Lara and the Angelina Jolie version, because those are 2 completely separate characters, really. So how did we get there is kind of the thesis of the TV show.
That's awesome. I feel like something happened within video games when it became much more storytelling.
Yeah.
And even I mean, it's cool. Like I remember being younger, and when I remember that happening and just having these conversations where it went from like, oh, you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog and you're just trying to get to the end of the level or something, to kind of like this complex storytelling, and you become attached to the characters, which is great.
Yeah.
And I just want to backtrack on something I said. This isn't nerd talk. This is, I could talk extensively about certain movies and topics, and someone would be like, you sound insane. So I was just joking. All right.
Wait, to answer your question though about like the research part of it.
Oh, right.
I didn't necessarily, like, I replayed a couple of the games before starting writing, but it's really just to kind of like get back into the feel of it because I hadn't played it in years. I think like I didn't have to do research because it was sort of all in my brain already in terms of who she was, what her backstory was, the things she cared about, what some of her adventures had been. And I really wanted to separate myself from the games that we've already played and seen. I wanted this to be its own thing that told a separate story, because why do we need an adaptation of a game we've already played? We do not.
Yeah.
So in terms of research, is really just kind of replaying some of the games. And Crystal Dynamics, in terms of their involvement, it was a lot of like, hey, this is kind of where we're going with Tomb Raider. I sort of didn't need their research packet. Like, I think they prepared it for someone who might have been showrunning if they weren't a fan of the show. So they kind of just like gave it to me anyways. But I was like, yeah, I know all this stuff already. Like, let's just go.
Yeah, I think that's why you're perfect for this. I'm not just saying this because this is like in your DNA. This is not like something exactly what you said. It's not like someone who hasn't watched the movies or played the games before. You're like, no, I'm good.
I
got this. So you've played all the games. You've watched all the movies. How do you balance the inclusion of returning characters and the creation of brand new ones? This is actually a two-part question. Related to that, how do you make sure the returning characters have a place in the story and don't feel like glorified cameos?
That's an interesting question because it wasn't very difficult for me to not do glorified cameos. And maybe it's because I carefully chose characters from the IP that I knew I wanted to be part of the story. Not just like I pop in and say hello to Jonah and then I leave. If Jonah's going to be in it, he's going to play a major story role. He's going to be important to Lara for some reason. If Zip's going to be in it, and I chose Zip because I just love his voice from the video games. He's so funny and he's so different from Lara. He's very quippy. He's like the guy in the chair that you wanted that fun voice in the show because Lara can be so flat and serious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I never thought of them as cameos. And I sort of don't like cameos. I'm a fan of them when I watch them. Like Deadpool cameos got me every single time. But if I'm going to write something, I think I really want to have those characters really, really involved. And then I loved creating new characters because I wanted to make Lara's world feel bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what's so fun about her is that her world is actually huge. The network of connections she has around the world was like in the movies, which a lot of people have seen. There's a moment where Angelina Jolie goes to like a random temple in the middle of nowhere, Asia, and like knows the monk who's there and like meditates there. Like she knows the language and the idiosyncrasies of this tiny little culture. And I was like fascinated by that. And so what's so cool about Tomb Raider, which is also similar to Indiana Jones often, like they'll go up to someone who they already know and you're like, what is the story behind this? And you're never told. So this was a chance for the show to bring in new people and say like, this is how she got her network. So it was also easy to bring in new people because I didn't feel beholden to just stick with characters that we knew.
Oh man, I love that. I love like the idea of, I'm assuming that when they created the Angelina Jolie movie, they probably had no idea what they were doing when they like had her interact with a monk. Meaning they had no idea that, 20 years later, someone like yourself is going to be like, that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's spin into that or like lean into that idea about something. So I really like that idea.
There's another moment in the movies where she needs a ride to like the middle of Africa. And they're like, well, how are you going to get there, Lara? You got to get there fast. And she's like, I know somebody, right? And you see this picture of her with a bunch of Navy SEALs. And she's just like, she's all armored up. She's got like her face painted. She's a total badass with all these dudes. And then they like basically fly her in and drop her down in the middle of Africa. She's like, thanks, boys. And you're like, how? Like, did she fight with? Like, who are these people? So yeah, I love that shit.
Okay, quickly pivoting to a little more crafty stuff.
Okay.
How does the eventual rewrite process in animation compare to rewrites in live action?
They're mostly the same. The process with animation is different in that you see like full cuts of your show much earlier than you ever will in live action. So in live action, you're on set and you're realizing in the moment, oh shit, this doesn't work. This line isn't coming out of that character's mouth right. I got to rewrite this. Or, hey, our location is no longer available to us tomorrow. We got to do this scene no longer on the castle battlements, but in a bedroom. Okay. All right, cool. Like, let me figure out how to rewrite that. So it's actually like, it's super stressful in live action. Whereas in animation, the rewrites, yes, will come in the records when an actor says something. They're like, that's not really feeling right. Like there's a line, this is such a minor example, but there was a line where Lara says, a chippy place. And I'm from America. I don't know what that means. I'd put like a fish and chips place. And
Yeah.
she's like, well, like kind of the slang that Lara might use. This is Haley. She's like, kind of the slang that Lara might use is a chippy place. So I'm going to say that instead. So great. Like we'll change
Yeah.
that line. So some of that would happen in the record. But for the most part, it's seeing a cut back of the episode from Powerhouse and being like, okay, this scene no longer works, which that happened a lot in episode 2, actually. If we get to that and you guys have questions about that, we can talk about it then too. But in that episode was a lot longer. In fact, all of my episodes, because I come from drama, I come from hour-long drama and features. So my episodes, when I first wrote them, were like 40 pages, 50 pages. I had to get them down to 22 or less because the show has to be 22 minutes, which means your script usually has to be shorter because action takes a long time to animate. So an action scene may be, 2 lines on a page, but it actually takes up 40 seconds of your show. So wow. I had to do a lot of cutting, and that was a big part of the rewriting process in animation is, oh, fuck, this doesn't fit in an animated 22-minute show. Now I have to cut stuff, but because it's Tomb Raider, which means Lara is going after a mystery in every episode, it's very hard to cut things because everything leads into everything else. They're very intricately woven. So it was a lot of like cutting and somehow still piecing the mystery together in a way that made sense, and hopefully it still does. But that was kind of what the revision process has been like.
I love the idea of having these much longer episodes, and there's like release the Tasha cut of Tomb Raider.
Well, that's exactly how it feels. Like every episode is actually different, the original version. So
you had just mentioned Haley, and you're referring to Haley Atwell, the voice of Lara Croft. Did Netflix give you some names that you needed to hire? And that was the question. But I guess since we're here, might as well give a shout out to the amazing cast and whoever's in Tomb Raider.
Yeah, they're awesome. I mean, Earl Balin returns as Jonah. Alan Maldonado plays Zip. Haley Atwell is Lara. They're awesome. And I was fortunate enough to not get a mandate from Netflix on who to hire. I think in part, animation has a little bit more freedom right now, which is great. I was definitely told, you're not going to get Haley Atwell. So have some backups ready who are not famous. Because, my list was like, no, A-listers. Like who, obviously they're going to want to play Lara Croft. And then, I had to have a difficult conversation with producers where they're like, have some backups, Tasha, because this is not going to happen. And then Haley, who was my first choice, said yes. So I think everyone was shocked. and I was like, see, guys,
yeah.
I told you. Yeah, no mandates, really. It was great.
What you just explained, which is amazing, by the way, but like what you just explained is why, like kind of in the world of screenwriting, when you write a script and you're working with somebody and you're like wanting to take the script to somebody, and producers will always push back. Like there's always naysayers, and you have your manager, you have your agent, whoever are like, yeah, they're just not going to do this. We're not going to waste our time. But it's like, just try, please, just try. And this is why. It
hurts nobody to try. I agree with you.
Okay. So moving into the tone of the show.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple tone-related questions, tone and theme-related questions, actually. So here's one. It's great for you. All right. The Survivor games are rated for adults, and this show is rated for teens. Was it your decision to tone down the violence for anyone to enjoy the show, and did you find it difficult to manage and make an emotional impact for the viewers?
Oh, interesting. No, it was not my choice to make it for teens. That was sort of impressed upon me, which is fine. That was like they knew they wanted to make a show for everybody. And I definitely at first was like, I don't like that. I'm just going to write what I want to write. And I kind of did. I never found myself toning down the violence. I never found myself toning down themes. I mean, Tomb Raider has never been historically like a sexual game, so we didn't even have to worry about that kind of stuff. It's really just violence. And it gets pretty it gets pretty violent, actually. And in fact, it gets so violent that I would I would be like, guys, we should check with Netflix if this is okay, because this is rough even for me. And they'd be like, no, Netflix says it's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
There was even one death in particular in episode 3 where I toned it down. I had the animators tone it down because it felt. Listen, I like violent deaths. You know this about me.
I do.
They're really fun. I love writing them. I love watching them. But there was something about this particular death in episode 3 where I was like, Lara feels like a total horrible person. And it's hard to walk her back from having done something like this. And she still does really, violent things in that episode. Mm-hmm. But this one was just a little too much. So we kind of like had to work with the sound effects to make it feel like less awful. And then some of the blood spray, we're like, can we tone that down a little bit? But yeah, I mean, Netflix was fantastic. They really embraced it, which is why actually when I said, hey, like you should bring Amelia to the screening, part of me was like, but I should warn you, there's some violence in this. I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, my little girl.
Does she like, do you watch? I mean, you watch, so like you guys watch Mission Impossible, but there's not a lot of blood in Mission Impossible. And then there's a lot of blood in animation in the show, but it's animated blood.
I have a feeling, this is just Amelia in particular, I have a feeling there's going to be some things that kind of spook her and scare her. And it's more of like the creatures and like, for some reason, she doesn't like eyeballs. Like there's sort of like, when you see like monsters' eyes that are like glowing or something.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that.
I'm aware.
Episode 2 and 4 are maybe not the best for her.
Okay. She still thinks there's a character named after her, but
there is.
No, she
her
thinks
mom.
It's because of her.
We can continue this live for as long. I'm down with you.
Thank you. I'm gonna be like, it was never Amelia. She changed every mother's name to Amelia. So thank you for naming it after my daughter. Okay. The theme of grief. You have chosen that for the first season of the show. Do you think it was a risk to take and tie the events that happened in the anime to Richard Croft? Wait, that doesn't even make sense as a question.
It does make sense because
really?
A lot of fans are upset, which I understand as one of them. That
there is a part there.
An upset part?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm just going to read this one part, so maybe it'll tailor your question a little differently. Because after it says about Richard Croft, says, since he's not really a beloved character from the fandom. and then, and then, how did you manage to get Lara out of the shadow, basically, is what the question is.
So Richard Croft is her dad. And I think people are just sick of her backstory being like, oh, my dad died and I feel so guilty about it. I'm so sad and I need revenge on my dad, which I get. I get having a tired backstory and wanting her to move on. I mean, it was also in the movies, the Angelina Jolie movies. John Voight played her father, and it was a big thing. I mean, I love grief as a topic, as a theme. However, I don't actually see the theme of season 1 being grief. I see it as Lara isolating herself because of her grief, because of stuff that happened earlier. But now we're dealing with a Lara who is isolating and needs to figure out if this is the path she wants to choose for her life, a life of not having relationships, of separating herself from everyone who loves her for fear of losing them or whatever her trauma is. Or is she going to choose to have a real life and be a happy person? That to me is what the theme is. It's not like, oh, my dad, oh God, I'm so sad about my dad, or I'm so sad about Conrad Roth dying in the 2013 game. I think that's like the jumping off point, but it's not a huge topic of conversation. And in the games, for example, it's a lot of like, oh, my dad did this. Oh, my dad, I miss my dad. We don't have a lot of that in this show. And it really was my intention to move her out of the old tired backstory and into new shit that she hasn't dealt with before. But I didn't feel like we could just leave this grief story behind entirely and just pretend it didn't exist. And I think that's kind of what a lot of people want, is just like, let's give me a whole new Lara. And that's not really the point of the show. The point is to say these two Laras are connected. Let's get there. And we have to get there through story. You know, we can't just magically have her healed from this thing that has been devastating for so long. So that, I guess that's my... And I like Richard Croft. I don't know why people don't like him. I think they're just sick of hearing his fucking name.
I have a Richard Croft question, but I also just want to say, I think what you're doing is correct in the sense of like what you're saying about grief and everything, because anyone who has dealt with grief or has had problems with someone, they don't walk around and be like, oh man, my dad wasn't there for me. It's not that. It's like you express that in different avenues in your life. Like, I'm going to yell at somebody, and it's like, well, what's the root of that problem? And it's like, well, it's because my dad wasn't around. Like that. It takes like, it's like peeling back the onion. So
that's it. Yeah.
You're not doing this on the nose shit.
Yeah.
You are a freaking nuanced screenwriter that knows emotion. Okay. Now, can we talk about what's up with Richard Croft? What's everyone's beef? This is a Josh question.
I think they're just sick of her having daddy issues, which is what I think they like wrap it up into.
Really?
I personally don't get, like, it's such a good motivation. Like, my dad, because you start to realize you think at first her dad was just this rich dude who maybe had secrets or like maybe was a corrupt politician or something, and then he died, and then that's kind of all you know. And oh, that's so sad, she lost her. She's an orphan rich girl is tragic in its way. But then you realize that Richard Croft actually had been an adventurer himself, and he was in the Illuminati or Trinity in the new like secret societies. He was involved in all these things, and you're peeling back this onion of intrigue and mystery. And actually, my dad was murdered. He didn't commit suicide, and this whole time I thought he committed suicide, and now he was murdered. Which that's a whole like if you're grieving a dad who committed suicide and then suddenly realize he's murdered, like, that's fantastic storytelling. I want to know that story. So again, I don't know why people hate it so much. I think it's great.
Sounds like a badass to me.
I
it sounds
know.
like Bruce Wayne had a daughter
This is what I'm talking about. Like, if Bruce Wayne was even more nerdy, like a history nerd instead of like a tech nerd, and he had a daughter, that's what this would be.
So if Bruce Wayne and Indiana Jones had a child, it's Lara Croft.
It's Lara Croft. Oh my God.
Okay. Can we get a spinoff of Richard Croft? An origin story?
I would write the shit out of that.
I think so.
Because also, like, her mom, Amelia, there's also mystery around that, where she died in a plane crash, and that's kind of all you know for a while. And then you realize, like, oh, either maybe she didn't die and she's like just in another dimension, or she too was murdered, or maybe she's just running from something and she's actually out there somewhere. Like, there's so much richness in her parents that 100% a story about Amelia and Richard Croft and like their adventure days would be great. I don't know why people hate them.
Well, we're gonna change that. I know everyone cares about Tomb Raider Lara Croft, but I care about her parents.
You know what, Josh? If you double thumbs up Tomb Raider enough and I get another season, I'm going to do some flashback episodes of Lara, Amelia, and Richard.
I'm going to thumbs up the shit out of this show. Okay, well, kind of, I don't know if this is along these lines, but are there any crazy ideas that weren't possible to put in the season of the show, or crazy ideas that didn't survive the cut? You might not be able to answer that, but did you have any crazy ideas that they were just like, nah?
I think if I went back through my scripts, which I certainly can if we want to get into some nitty gritty of things that were cut, and if those are questions people start to have. However, I will say generally, I put all the crazy ideas in the scripts and was expecting, Powerhouse or the producers or Legendary or Netflix to say, no, like, that's too expensive to do. Like, that set piece is too big, Tasha. We can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I never heard that. They were just like, got it. Water? Got it. Storm effects? Got it. No, actually. I think all the crazy things I dreamt about actually made it in some version.
Boom. Okay. How you doing with these questions? I got a few more.
Okay.
Can you speak to how many Easter eggs are in the series?
Oh, so many. I don't even, it's just, there are so many things in the background. There are little moves that she'll do. There are little quips that she'll have.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes, I would see like like they decided to put a teddy bear in this shot. I'm like, well, like let's make the teddy bear from the video game that she happens to find in this part of the thing. And like I would send a reference to Powerhouse to say like, let's try and make it look like this.
Wow.
So there are things like that where stuff would appear and it's like, oh, well, let's just make that something from the game. And then there's a lot of artifacts in the show, right? And so we would definitely had like a list of artifacts from the video games that might make sense to be in the background of this particular shot. So there's a lot of that going on, which is just super fun.
I love Easter eggs.
They're great.
I love them. I've actually we've managed to kind of like loop together all these different questions because there's a lot of them were very similar.
You're doing a great job of like filtering them. You're a great interviewer.
Oh my God. Thank you. I think it's from the podcast. Are there any certain characters that you love to write the most in the show?
Lara.
Okay, yeah, I figured that.
Zip is really fun too because he has a combination of he's so whip smart and he knows so much about so many things. He's like very fast talking. He's also really funny and really reactionary. And the things Lara does horrifies him. And so it's very fun to play those two characters together. It's very similar to actually the setup of Ethan Hunt and
Benji.
Yeah, where Benji's so good at his job, but then something Ethan does, he's like, what the fuck, Ethan? Yeah. Are you insane? Because the trick that does in writing is it makes Ethan Hunt or Lara Croft seem way more badass because you have someone who's capable saying, holy shit, even that is insane what you're doing. So it's a really handy writing trick to use Zip and Benji in that way. And it's also just really fun to watch and listen to.
2 questions.
Okay.
Ready? This is a heavy one.
Oh.
What is your perception of Lara's psychology and ways to deal with her problems?
Avoid them.
I like that.
Avoid them at all costs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. The final question I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
Not the end of us talking about this, but just the final question for today.
Uh-huh.
We have seen Lara Croft on the big screen 3 times before. What did you think worked or not in any of these adaptations from your writing and fan point of view? Are there any traps that you wanted to avoid from the previous iterations of Lara Croft?
I love the Angelina Jolie movies personally. I own them on DVD and Blu-ray.
Oh.
I wanted to be clear because just a digital copy doesn't.
Yeah. There's 2 Angelina Jolie ones?
There's 2.
Okay.
I think one's called just Tomb Raider. The other is Cradle of Life, starring Gerard Butler, co-starring Gerard Butler.
Really? I've seen both.
So they're so good. They're so fun. So if I could be anywhere near as fun as those movies, amazing. I think something I wanted to do more of, and again, like Angelina Jolie is sort of where my Lara Croft is going towards. So she's not quite as self-confident as that woman is. She's not quite as, I think, like Angelina Jolie's Lara is witty, but in a very dry way. Like she has one-liners that are spectacular, but otherwise is very quiet and very cold. And I didn't want to write a Lara Croft who was that quiet and cold because that's not where she's coming from these new games. You can't just suddenly make her cold. She kind of builds into this person who is a bit quieter and a bit funnier. So I'm losing the question. Like, I'm not going to say that the new Alicia Vikander movie is flawed because that is a really hard movie to adapt because you can't just adapt it straight, that video game straight, because it kind of makes no sense.
Yeah.
Real. I mean, in terms of a 2-hour length thing that you're going to watch in a theater, you can't just do that story. It's very supernatural. It's very bizarre. And so they chose to, I think this is probably also why fans hate Richard Croft. They chose to do a father-daughter story in that. And that's not actually what's in that video game. They made that up for the video game. And I think they also tried to find a logic behind the supernatural stuff that happens in the game, probably because they wanted it to feel grounded and probably because of budget. So, our budget allows for us to go into the supernatural stuff, which is cool, and not have to, I will say this, similar to Indiana Jones, there's always this sense of like, but that could be real.
Yeah.
Even though that thing feels supernatural, looks supernatural, maybe it's real. And that's always going to be the tinge of stuff in Tomb Raider as well. So I don't know. I would love to be as good as those things. I'm not going to say that any of them have flaws that I tried to actively avoid.
It's interesting because it is much harder to tell from a video game to a movie, because video games are long and they are complex and they have levels and they have missions and objectives. And it just, now that you're talking about that, I'm not sure a 2-hour movie is the right medium for a video game. It does seem like a very, very tough thing to do because you're not going to make anybody happy. And with, a series, you can explore a lot of different ideas and draw things out a little more.
Yeah. And there's a million versions of that Alicia Vikander movie they could have done. Even if they're still adapting just that one game, which they were. Mm-hmm. There's still a million I'm sure everyone who came in to pitch on that movie had a different version of what that movie can be. And they chose to do what they thought was going to be a more emotional story, which is, I've lost my father. I don't care about anything, which her starting point in that movie was great. I don't know if you remember, but she's like a bicycle delivery person.
Oh, right. That's right.
And then she would box in her spare time. That's a very cool version of Lara Croft. And she's avoiding responsibility. She's this rich girl who doesn't want to join the company that her father has left her. All of that is very cool. And then she finds a clue that her father may be still alive. All of this is good storytelling.
Yeah.
It just, I think the father story didn't pay off and didn't really blend well enough with the mystery of what Lara was going after, that we felt like, oh, maybe we didn't get the movie we wanted. But that whole setup is fantastic, and I think they did a great job.
I actually just realized something. So you had said this takes place in between the games and the Angelina Jolie movie. Mm-hmm. So if I'm preparing for this release, should I be, what am I doing? What if I'm just dedicating my life to Tomb Raider? And you're like, here's exactly how you should live your life over the next few days. You're going to play this game, and this game. You're going to watch this, and then now you're going to watch our series.
Okay, this is going to take a lot of hours for you, but I would play the Survivor game, which the 2013 game, which is the very first one where she kills their first person, just so you see who she was and who she's starting to become. Mm-hmm. I would play Shadow of the Tomb Raider because that is we're kind of in a direct pickup from that video game.
Okay.
And then I would play Legend, Tomb Raider Legend, because that is the Lara we're moving into. Or if you don't play video games, watch walkthroughs of both of those, and then watch an Angelina Jolie movie if you don't want to play Legend, or watch Legend because it's an old game, so it's pixelated and it may be hard to watch a walkthrough of that stuff. But the Angelina Jolie person is who we're moving into, so then you'll get to see sort of the bookends of who Lara is, and then this will slot in between.
Boom! I think we did it.
Good questions, guys. Those are really good, and also questions I've not been asked by the press. So that's why I love creative people asking questions.
How did you feel about all of them? Did we miss anything?
I'm excited to get into if people have those kinds of questions, process stuff of actual, I feel like the questions I would have in the audience would be okay, I watched this first episode. How did you decide to do this? Or I didn't really like this moment, or I was confused by this moment. How did you arrive there? And then what's the sausage involved? Because we can talk about the politics of something, or I ended up having to cut scenes because it was over time and this is what I chose to cut. We can get into those kinds of things because that just helps with the practicality of how things get made. So those are questions I would ask personally, but
those are the questions I would ask as well, actually. And maybe I will next time around.
Because you're going to have seen it by the next episode. At least some of it.
Yeah. Well, I have seen all the episodes by the next episode.
That would be amazing. It's only it's not very long because they're only 22 minutes. So.
Oh, yeah. I actually might have seen it all by the next time we do this. Anyway.
Okay.
That's the end. Good question.
Amazing. Quote of the day. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram or on Twitter at Tasha 3.0.
I am Joshua Hallman on Twitter, Josh Hallman on Instagram.
And as always, the Act Two podcast is a production of Act Two, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.